Good afternoon. Should athletes in boxing be allowed to represent their country internationally? I invite you to firstly refrain from imposing any predispositions to this topic depending on your knowledge, and allow both sides of the argument, for and against, to help identify the issue, explore all ethical issues and implications of the issue. For reference, literature will be utilised to support both sides, with theories as a basis for opposing perspectives. The two ethical theories that will be focused on are consequentialism and justice and rights. Both theories are compiled of reasons why actions apply to the theories and the meaning of the types of actions involved. Further explanation of these two theories will be presented later on in the presentation. Firstly, background into the country will give us some scope on the dynamics of Cuba as a country. Cuba is an island located between the Caribbean Sea and the North Atlantic Ocean. Boxing originated from Greece in the 4th century BC, and as with all sports at the time, had a military focus. This training was a foundation to serving in war, predominantly displaying the competitive element. From approximately 1902 to 1958, boxing in Cuba wasn't classified as a sport. There were no policies behind the sport, and the importance of physical activity or emphasis on bringing the community together. In the past, it was labelled as a third world country, characterised by deprivation and poverty. Prior to the 1960s, sport mirrored Cuba's social ethics and racial separation. McGuigan explains resources were inadequate, given the constant economic battle of its status as a third world country. The wealthy were given opportunities to further their careers, specifically focusing on international boxing. Cuba only focused on two sports that were dominated by the high class society, which included baseball and boxing. In regards to the social divide, the lower class citizens still participated in boxing, as it provided an outlet for the restricted social culture they were bound in. However, the discrimination of class within Cuban boxing gave no opportunity for the best athletes in that country to participate in international contests, as only the wealthy were selected. Instead, the lower class boxers created their own private clubs, creating a sense of belonging and unity, even whilst living amongst poverty. For them, boxing was seen as a dangerous sport. However, the life in which they led was seen as a continual fear and danger of violent death anyway. It must be discussed whether or not that this is the most ideal sport for a country in their position, where crime is almost a norm in their society. Should Cuba, as a nation, be encouraging that? It's an individual sport, so shouldn't they be pushing for a team sport or a sport that doesn't mirror acts of violence? But on the other hand, they are trying to survive every day. So having boxing as an outlet gives the athletes in the country the opportunity to fill their own needs. Trying to survive is their top priority, so people outside of that society could not understand, as their top priority is not just trying to survive. In 1961, relations between Cuba and America deteriorated, and Fidel Castro became the leader of the Cuban government. The American government restricted exchange and involvement between the two countries, and as a reaction to the American sanctions on Cuba, the Cuban government banned professional sport clubs in the country. Amateur boxing was still acceptable, however this gave no promising athletes opportunity to further their boxing career. Changes in government ideologies attempted to diminish the division of social class with a new focus on nationalism being paramount. Yet in contrast to baseball, boxing was incompletely integrated into the nationalist project by mid-century. It was valued more as a source of state revenue than national pride. This was the beginning of the utilitarianism theory, as the government wanted to create the greatest outcome for all involved and the greatest number of people. Clearly allowing the athletes to fight professionally went against Castro's ideas and expected that the rules of the theory were to be followed and that there was not to allow any athlete to fight internationally. Following the rules meant that Castro and the government did not calculate what it could do for the individuals of the sport, but rather prioritise the beliefs that would produce a positive result for majority. Therefore, a new general sports program with well-funded facilities was introduced. The National Institute of Sports, Physical Education and Recreation, also known as INDA. This program encouraged recognition for Cuba around the world and gave the country a sense of unity. The INDA program created new positions, which were significantly chosen for citizens who were from poor backgrounds as well as the wealthy. The program gave a sense of community and equality, with elite athletes being the main focus. This was achieved by the construction of public training centres and ensuring that there was public participation no matter which economic group you're associated with. These athletes were given a high level of training, and athletes identified as having high potential attending camps where intense training followed. These camps were described as military style, which promoted the idea of discipline being paramount. By providing these athletes with the structure they required, Cuba as a nation kept their high regard in the boxing world. Evidently, recent success in the Olympics has been phenomenal. 2000 Sydney Olympics gave Cuba 11 gold medals, 11 silver medals, and 7 bronze medals. Pedovino explains success is continually on the rise every year, with the athletes participating becoming stronger and more talented. Specifically, in boxing, Cuba has gained 32 Olympic gold medals since 1972, which evidently is greater than any other country. With these kinds of records, it is possible that success is being achieved without boxing at an international level, contributing to the strength of the utilitarianism theory that the government is utilising. So to reiterate, the government began focusing on the country as whole and what was best for everyone, in alignment with the theory. This was also contributed by boxing athletes, specifically Teofilo Stevenson, who prioritised the idea of representing their country as his primary focus, as opposed to the possibility to earn a significant income. In 1984, he was offered millions to turn professional and fight Mike Tyson. Stevens, who only wanted to fight for his country, proclaiming, "I'm not my own master, I'd have to abandon my country and my family to fight Tyson, and you can't be happy like that, not for all the money in the world." This shaped Cuba as a nation due to the loyalty and honour Stevenson showed, which is not present before the 1960s. His choice to continue in the amateur league, boxing added numerous medals to Cuba's tally and contributed to the shaping of the nation. However, do the actions displayed by Stevenson suggest that any boxer wanting to fight internationally should not be inclined to do so? In terms of human rights, it is of the belief that everyone has their own leveled way of thinking, regardless of any conditions, such as physical, economic, cultural, or social. Therefore, even though the culture of the government wanted to impose a sense of unity, belonging, a real community feel. However, if you wanted to fulfill your own dreams while being in a community, there was no way this was possible. The government was completely interfering with how they were choosing to live their life, and interestingly, theorised by human rights, specifically the negative type, suggests that the government must not constrain the freedom of individuals. There was also another negative connotation attached to the ban of professional boxing clubs in Cuba. This restriction encouraged some of the athletes to relocate to other countries, such as the US, to further their boxing career. This was a hard decision for the athlete to make, as it meant leaving their family and country behind, but it was in hope to create a better life for their family through earning money. A relocation is not as always simple as it seems. In reference to Guillermo Rejondiux, who failed his attempts in 2007, resulting in being banned from the Cuban team and therefore couldn't compete in the Beijing Olympic Games in 2008. Therefore, it can be questioned, was the government's choice to focus on utilitarianism in the best interests of all involved? Several athletes like Guillermo attempted to leave the country in hope to fight as a professional boxer, as opposed to remaining in Cuba, fighting only in the amateur league. If we take a look at the diagram on the slide, you will notice a layout with two parts to consequentialism, ethical egoism, and utilitarianism. Ethical egoism doesn't reflect the idea of being selfish or greedy. It is more acting out of your own self-interest. Egoism also relates to the idea of knowing that you'll be better off by living in such a society. This is heavily reflected by the choices of Guillermo Rejondiux, as displayed on the diagram. You will notice 3 types of ethical egoism and who falls under which category on basis of their actions. So for individual, we have Fidel Castro acting in the interests of one government. So the idea is that everyone should act in the interest of one person, the one person being Fidel Castro, or as a whole being the one entity being the government, which means that everyone must follow. In terms of personal, we have Guillermo Rejondiux. He was acting in his own self-interest, but made no claim for anyone else. In this case, it is evident the contrast between the two types of ethical egoism. However, what determines who is right and who is wrong? Ethical theories allow us to analyse and assess situations and give reason to why people act in a particular way. Ethically speaking, the government was not aware not all of the citizens would be content with the ideas they were putting forward, but felt as if the majority of the country would benefit. In contrast, the nation had history of being a third world country, so why would the government deter the chance to create wealth? If boxing as a sport contributed to the country becoming united and creating a sense of nationalism, then why would you not want to present this at an international level? International boxing is still banned in Cuba. McGuigan suggests if the ban was to be removed, the possibility of Cuban fighters winning world titles would be numerous due to their talent. Inside of this continual ban, Cuban boxing athletes are still currently resorting to relocating to America, and in particular, to pursue their dream. McGuigan suggests the removal of the international boxing ban will be based on politics. The Cuban government wants boxers to fight for their country and not for the potential of earning a high salary. However, the attraction to the idea of money is strong, given their lower social culture and recognition in comparison to larger countries. So although Cuba has dramatically developed nationally and socially over the past 100 years, it still suggests further improvement to the politics of Cuba's nationalism is required. In the past, boxing was an outlet for the underprivileged, which the government saw in need of a change. The new program created a sense of nationalism for the country and provided the nation with recognition around the world, which reflects the utilitarianism theory. The attempt to diminish social divisions within the country provided sport to become an important public congregation, as well as furthering the boxing athlete's skills and training for the amateur league. However, athletes within the country are still being denied of their own human rights and segregated due to their own needs and ideas of life. Although there are still few athletes who remain to become better boxers and pride themselves on their loyalty, which was not a main focus of previous years. It can be said, boxing will remain as an important aspect of all social spheres within Cuba, strengthening the social fabric and being an integral part of life, culture, and politics. Perhaps one day, with loosening of the professional restrictions, Cuba's dominance of boxing and the benefits it confers to the nation could extend even further than it does now.